Okay guys, it is time to add yet another chapter in everybody's favorite rivalry, and that is Shimano versus Daiwa. And I do believe this might be the first ever JDM only battle I've ever done between these two companies. Could be wrong, I've made a lot of videos, but I'm pretty sure it is. And that of course is going to be the field battle between the Shimano Scorpion BFS and the Daiwa Alphas Air. And these two are quote unquote budget bait finesse reels for these two companies. And that's kind of funny because 5 years ago bait finesse and budget were never said in the same sentence ever. So before we get out in the field, let's talk about the specs on these two reels. Now, the Alphas came out in 2016 and the Scorpion came out in 2017. And I'm pretty sure Shimano targeted, of course, you know, they targeted the Alphas, but as far as specifications go, since they're so similar, you know that Shimano was targeting that Alphas when they came out with the specs on the Scorpion. Okay, so let's talk about them real quick. Now both of them have aluminum frames and graphite side plates, so no fancy Zion or CI4 Plus side plates. The Scorpion has more bearings, 7+1, while the Alphas has 6+1. The Scorpion comes in 2 gear ratios, 6.3 and 8.2, while the Alphas comes in also 2 gear ratios, 5.8 and a 7.2. Now they both have aluminum handles, but the Scorpion has a longer handle at 84 millimeters, while the Alphas has a shorter 80 millimeter handle. Now the Alphas is rated to 4 kilograms of drag, and the Scorpion is rated at 3.5 kilograms of drag. So on paper the Alphas has a higher drag rating, but since these are finesse reels that are going to use really light line, you know, ultimate stopping power isn't going to be the priority, it's going to be the smoothness. And both of these are designed for saltwater rated. The drag star on the Scorpion is made of metal, while the drag star on the Alphas is made of Zion. Now, I prefer metal, but I also prefer bigger drag stars, so it's kind of I guess a toss-up between the two as far as the drag star goes. Now, both of them have super ridiculously shallow spools. Now, the Alphas is rated at 50 meters of 8-pound line, while the Scorpion is rated at only 45 meters of 8-pound line. I think the Alphas has a slightly wider spool, is why. Now, the suggested retail price is $37,600 for the Alphas, and that's in yen, and $35,000 for the Scorpion. So the Scorpion is a little bit cheaper, but it really just depends on which shop you order from. Some shops show the Scorpion as being more expensive, and some shops have the Alphas Air as being more expensive. Now, the Alphas has the advantage of being made in Japan, while the Scorpion is made in Malaysia. Now, the Scorpion has the better spool tension in my opinion. It's bigger, easier to reach. Of course, it's aluminum, and better looking in my opinion. While the Alphas, I've mentioned it before, has this teeny tiny spool tension knob, and you can't even buy a bigger replacement because how close it is to this main shaft piece, and neither of them click. Alright, so one thing to note is the Scorpion has a drag clicker, while the Alphas does not. So Shimano really basically just, you know, barely beat out the Alphas as far as specifications go and little things, little touches, but only just. They didn't want to go overboard and give you too much. Okay, so all these specs to me really don't matter. What matters is going to be these things right here, the spools and the brake systems. And those are the most important things when it comes to bait finesse. So let's pull the scale out and get some numbers. Okay guys, so I popped the scale out and we're gonna get some numbers here. Okay, let's weigh the reels first. And according to the websites, they should weigh the same at about 5.9 ounces. Okay, so 5.96 for the Scorpion. And the Alphas is 5.91. So the Alphas is a fraction lighter. And that's kind of amazing considering the size difference between the two. As you can see, the Scorpion is noticeably smaller. And in my opinion, this palm's a lot better because it is way lower as well. The Alphas has this hump here that definitely sits at least 2 to 3 millimeters above the Scorpion. And I can confirm that the Scorpion, this platform is probably one of the top 3 most comfortable palming reels. And I can definitely feel this hump here on the Alphas when I'm palming it, even though this is a lefty. And I think they accomplished this near equal weight despite the Alphas being much bigger. It's because the main gear on the Scorpion is much bigger than the main gear on the Alphas, despite both of them being brass. And I'd be willing to bet the Scorpion has more power as well. Okay, so let's get to the nitty gritty. We're gonna weigh these spools. Okay guys, so I have the spools out and let's compare them up close. Now they're both 32 millimeters in diameter. As you can see, the insides are extremely ported on both, but the Alphas doesn't have any kind of porting on the outside, while the Scorpions is pretty heavily ported. You can also see that the Scorpion uses Shimano's standard long spool shaft, while the Alphas features the short speed shaft that the higher end reels in Daiwa's lineup have. And the Alphas has a bearing while the Scorpion does not. I believe the Alphas is a little bit wider, so it holds a little bit more line, but as far as like depth goes, they are very similar. I can't really tell a difference. Maybe the Alphas is a little bit deeper. But one thing to note, Daiwa doesn't recommend you use braid on their air spools because of the potential to be deformed despite using the higher grade G1 Duralumin. And the Alpha spool does use the G1 Duralumin. And I question that G1 Duralumin being stronger, because I've already damaged the spool cosmetically on this Alphas. And the Scorpion though, you can use light braid because hopefully the camera will pick it up, but it's got this internal ribbing on the interior of the spool, reinforcement, that allows you to use light braid on the Scorpion. Doubt this camera will pick it up though. There you can see the ribbing there. But yeah, let's get to weighing these spools now. Now I already know what these spools weigh, but this is just for you new guys. The Scorpion spool weighs 8.8 grams. The Alpha spool weighs 9.6. So right there you're thinking, wow, the Alpha spool weighs a lot more and Scorpion is gonna beat it in the field battle, but actually, hold on just a minute. This bearing weighs like 2.2 grams, and in the previous video, if you didn't see, I took the bearing off, and the spool only weighs 7.3 grams without this bearing. That is a heavy bearing. So, the tables are turned. The Alpha spool weighs about 1.5 grams less than the Scorpion spool as far as rotational mass goes, and that's significant in bait finesse. In fact, this weighs about the same as the ALDEBARAN BFS spool, which is more expensive, and also weighs about the same as the much more expensive CONQUEST BFS. So Daiwa gave a super light spool in their budget bait finesse reel. But here's the kicker as well. The brake system. Now on paper, since this spool is going to be much lighter, it should comfortably outcast the Scorpion with both the 16th ounce and the half ounce lures. Here's the lures, the 16th ounce little crank, and the 1/8 ounce minnow that I'm going to be throwing tomorrow. But Daiwa has the air brake system. Let's talk about the brakes now. Now both of these reels feature what I call dynamic brakes, meaning they're not static like some brake systems where the magnets and the piece of metal that it's reacting against is constantly in the same position. Shimano uses their, I think is a revolutionary system, the FTB system, where they have the magnets right here, and these are spring loaded, and when the spools are rotating, the magnets pop out. Hopefully this camera will focus, but yeah, you can see the magnets will pop out and get closer to the spool at the fastest point of revolution. And there's another bank on the other side that's also spring loaded as well. Now it's only spring loaded on one end of the bank of magnets. And of course you adjust how far these magnets go out with this dial, and they react with this unported section of the Shimano spool. As you can see the FTB brake logo there. Now what's revolutionary about this is that this allows Shimano to remove any kind of brake mechanism from their spools, making them as light as possible. Now with the Alphas, it uses the air brake, and the air brake is basically a version of MagForce that has the twisting rotor. So when the spool is spinning out, this rotor twists out and goes in between here, and there's little magnets on the inside of these two rings, and then as the spool slows down, it retracts back into its position. But the thing with air brakes is, since it only twists forwards and backwards, then this thing might be over braked. Now we saw that with the SS Air versus the Shimano ALDEBARAN. They were very similar, but ultimately the ALDEBARAN casted the heavier lure farther despite having a heavier spool. So a lighter spool, but with a heavier brake profile. So that's going to be the battle there. Much lighter spool, but what might be a over-braked brake system. Personally, my money's gonna go with the Alphas. Having casted them both, even though I didn't do it side by side, I was really impressed on how this Alphas casted really ultralight lures with a rod that, you know, wasn't even my best bait finesse rod. So my money is gonna be on the Alphas for winning both of those. Now I'm gonna string them up with 4-pound mono. Once again, here's the lures I'm gonna be throwing. little 1/16 ounce crankbait, and a 1/8 ounce minnow, Rapala minnow. I'm going to weigh these for you guys. 1.75, that's right at 1/16 of an ounce. 3.6, so a tad over 1/8 of an ounce. Alright, so I'm going to string them up. Hopefully tomorrow there will be no rain like it's been raining here for the last month every weekend, and get this test done for you guys. So I'll see you out on the field. Okay guys, up next we have the Alphas Air. I have the spool tension set to where there is just a fraction of lateral movement per Daiwa's instructions, and I have the external brake set to whatever that is. It's about halfway, and of course we're throwing the 1/8 ounce minnow first. So here we go. Okay guys, once again we have the Alphas Air. This time we're throwing the 1/16 ounce little crankbait, and the brake and spool tension settings are set exactly the same. So let's go. Okay guys, we have the Scorpion BFS. I have spool tension set to just minimize the side-to-side play. The brake is just past 4 externally. And we have the 1/8 ounce minnow. So let's go. Okay guys, we have the Scorpion BFS. I have the spool tension set to just minimize the side-to-side play. External dial is a little bit past 4. And we have the 16th ounce little crankbait. So let's go. Okay guys, so back from the field, and before we get into these results, I'm going to say that the Scorpion actually had to be tested 2 times. And the reason being is that the Scorpion was the first step to be tested, and when it completed its testing, the wind changed direction. It was normally going sideways, but when I started testing the Alphas, it came straight in towards me, and it stayed that way. I stood there for like a good 10 minutes waiting for the wind to stop blowing in my face, and I realized it wasn't going to stop, so I changed sides and tested the Alphas, and then, just to be fair, retested the Scorpion going the same way. So that being said, let's not beat around the bush. The Alphas came in 2nd place. Big shocker right there. I'm sure that's gonna trigger a lot of fanboys. But it came in 2nd place with both lures. Now it averaged 77 feet even with the little 1/8 ounce minnow. So that's about over 25 foot average. So that's actually pretty good, very good for such a light lure. And with the 16th ounce mini crankbait, it averaged 59.8 feet. Now, if anything, I was thinking that this thing would just destroy the Scorpion with that little 16th ounce crankbait, but it didn't, and I'll go over more on that later. So that means the winner of this budget JDM bait finesse shootout is the Scorpion BFS. Now the first time around with the 1/8 ounce minnow, it averaged 82.6 feet. The second time around, it averaged 83 feet even. And with the 16th ounce crankbait, the first time around, it averaged 64.4 feet. And the second time around, it averaged 64.2 feet. So very, very consistent results out of the Scorpion. And I actually took about a good 30 minutes fiddling with the Alphas, trying to make it cast farther. And because of that, and the fact that I woke up a little late, I wasn't able to test those other reels on the same day. But let's talk about this Alphas. Now, I thought it was just going to dominate the Scorpion because of the huge spool weight advantage, but this thing is a victim of its own air brake system. And I believe that the air brake is exaggerated when you are putting it on really, really light spools like this. So it just slows that spool down really, really fast, and going back and forth from one reel to the other, you can really tell the difference casting them both. That the Scorpion just casts a lot faster and a lot freer, and you can tell. So I would say that in the future, if Daiwa continues to make bait finesse reels, just give it the regular Mag Force Z style and leave the air brake out. I don't think it's needed. Mag Force Z is enough. But this thing is a badass little reel, there's no doubt about it. It casted great in isolation. And in fact, I'm going to take them side by side and actually go fishing, since I have 2 of the same rod. Alright, so how did the Scorpion win with having such a huge disadvantage in weight? And of course the air brake on the Alphas is a big part of it, but my theory is that since the Alphas came out in 2016 and the Scorpion came out in 2017, that Shimano probably, when they were developing this, they actually bought one of these and they tested it side by side, did some casting measurements like I did probably, and they realized that they could get away with, you know, an 8.8 gram spool, which is pretty heavy by today's bait finesse standards, and still be able to outcast the Alphas. So that means there's a lot of performance left Shimano can extract out of this spool. They can lighten it, you know, change the spool shaft material, give it a smaller spool shaft, give it more porting. But will Shimano give it to us in the next version? If there's a next version of this reel, we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, so the Scorpion BFS from Shimano wins this budget JDM only bait finesse shootout. But I will say this, there's another reel out there that cost about the same as these two reels that will probably more than likely just blow them both away, and that is the Abu Garcia REVO ALC BF7, which is basically the aluminum saltwater friendly version of the Abu Garcia REVO LTX. It's got the same super lightweight spool, same brakes, it's just made of aluminum, and it can be found for very similar prices to these two reels. So if you're looking for the ultimate in budget bait finesse, that REVO ALC is probably going to be it. Alright guys, so I did manage to test the other $300 bait finesse reels on a different day, and we'll go to those results in another video. Okay guys, thanks a lot.